Hi, everyone. We've been continuing in our sermon series on disciple. What does it mean exactly to be a disciple? We've talked about how that's like the primary task that we've been called to as the church when Jesus gave the Great Commission. We've talked about how transformation or discipleship is essentially a process of transformation that involves all of ourselves, our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. And then this week we talked about how. What are some of the key ingredients that help make transformation and discipleship happen? What are those necessary things? And we talked about three sort of key ingredients. We talked about how the context for discipleship is in community, in that being a disciple inherently involves other people, inherently involves loving one another and participating in differing levels of community. It can look different for the season that you're in or the type of community, but we do need that community element. The second thing we talked about is that the content for discipleship is always the truth of God. It's not our own opinions. It's not things that somebody whose podcast or book we really like. That ultimately what we need the truth of God to be forming and shaping us as disciples. Because ultimately we're disciples of Christ, not of anything else or anyone else. And so discipleship focuses around that content to make us more like Christ, to be people who live like Christ, love like Christ, and serve like Christ. The third thing we talked about is the tools for discipleship are spiritual practices, or maybe you've heard them called spiritual disciplines. This is like you're reading the Bible. This is your prayer. This is fasting. This is taking time in silence and solitude. This is acts of service, right? There's a whole list of these things. And sometimes we kind of have a limited view over what exactly spiritual practices can look like. And we kind of talked a little bit about how that might change from season to season, how your prayer life might go from looking one way at one time to looking different in another time. And then the last thing that we talked about after talking about the context, the content, and the tools was just simply to say that discipleship is about the gospel from beginning to end. That no matter how long you've been following Christ, you've not outgrown the need to remember the gospel, to look up at the cross, to be reminded of God's love and transforming grace that he has for us. And that ultimately, wherever we're at, Jesus Christ still remains enough for you and me. So with that, I hope that you have a good week discussing this and applying this in your communities. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.